For over 1,000 years, the Tibetan Book of the Dead has been a mystery guarded in the mountains of the Himalayas and in the memories of those who dared to look beyond life itself. It is not just an ancient text written on parchment. It is like a secret map, drawn not with ink but with consciousness. A guide that describes with almost poetic precision what happens when the heart stops beating and the invisible becomes our only horizon. It is said to have been written in the 8th century by Padmasambhava, the master known as the Lotus-born, a figure who seems to exist on the border between the human and the eternal. According to tradition, Padmasambhava did not write the book merely to teach, but to liberate. His words were not meant for the intellect, but for the spirit. He concealed them, sealing his teachings in termas, capsules of wisdom buried in the earth and in the human mind. And he did so because he knew the world was not yet ready to grasp such depth. It is as if he left a message suspended in time, waiting for humanity to mature enough to receive it. And perhaps we are beginning to reach that point, in this moment when science once again looks toward mystery, and spirituality rediscovers its curiosity for the unknown. The book speaks of the Bardos, intermediate states that consciousness traverses after death, but Tibetan masters said these Bardos do not belong solely to the beyond. They are mirrors that appear in every transition of life. When we say goodbye to someone, when a chapter ends, when something within us must die so another part can be born. All of that is a small Bardo. These moments, which we so often try to avoid, are invitations. They are portals disguised as pain, and those who learn to pass through them with awareness begin, without realizing it, to prepare for the greater passage, the one we will all someday make, silently, between the last breath and the next dawn of consciousness. The text describes that, in the instant the heart stops beating, the so-called clear light emerges, a silent, infinite, and serene radiance. It is not a light seen with the eyes, but one felt with the entire being. To recognize this light is to free oneself from the cycle of births and deaths. But not everyone succeeds, for before it, fear makes us recoil. Our attachment to forms, to faces, to memories makes us hesitate. It is the most luminous moment and, at the same time, the most challenging. The Dalai Lama often says that to understand death is to understand life, because the way we die is merely a reflection of how we have lived. And perhaps this is the most powerful lesson of the Bardo Thödol. Death is not the opposite of life. It is its continuity in another form. Today, science is beginning to touch the frontier that the ancients explored centuries ago. Research on near-death experiences, the so-called NDEs, brings reports that echo the same symbols and sensations described by Tibetan masters. Cardiologist Pim van Lommel, for instance, followed more than 300 patients who had been declared clinically dead. Many of them reported floating above their bodies, watching doctors trying to resuscitate them. Others felt a welcoming light and an indescribable peace, and most astonishingly, some describe precise details of what was happening in the room at a time when, theoretically, their brains no longer registered electrical activity. This forces us to question something we long took for granted. Does consciousness truly arise from the brain, or is the brain merely a window through which it manifests? Psychiatrist Bruce Grayson of the University of Virginia studied dozens of similar cases. He observed that many of these people changed profoundly after their experiences. They became more compassionate, lost their fear of death, and began to live with a different sense of purpose, as if they had returned carrying a fragment of the light they saw on the other side. And while medicine seeks answers, neuroscience begins to reveal clues. Research from the University of Michigan discovered that, at the exact moment of death, there is a surge of electrical activity in the brain. A sudden flash, almost like the glow of a candle before it goes out. But intriguingly, that flash resembles the patterns observed in states of deep meditation. The Tibetan masters called that instant the final clarity. The moment when the mind reveals itself in its purest form. A moment so brief it can feel eternal. Are we little by little rediscovering what the ancients already knew? Perhaps science and spirituality are not opposing sides, but two mirrors facing each other, reflecting the same mystery under different lights. When the last breath dissolves into the air and the heart finally falls silent, something happens. Something that no words can fully explain. The Tibetan Book of the Dead describes this moment not as an ending but as an opening. It is the beginning of an invisible journey, where consciousness detaches from the body and crosses the first Bardo. The encounter with the clear light. For some, this moment is liberating. For others, it is confusing. The mind, so used to clinging to forms, hesitates before the vastness. It's like a bird that has lived so long in a cage that it has forgotten what the open sky feels like, and when the door finally opens, it feels afraid to fly. Tibetan masters say it is attachment that prevents us from recognizing the light. Fear, guilt, desires, everything we accumulate in life, are the clouds that hide the natural radiance of consciousness. The text describes that when the light is not recognized, intense visions, sounds, images, and colors emerge, reflections of the mind itself. What we see does not come from the outside but from within. It's like dreaming while awake, only with the full force of the soul. Carl Jung, the famous Swiss psychologist, was fascinated by this. He saw the figures described in the Bardo Thödol as archetypes of the unconscious, symbolic representations of deep layers of the psyche. The peaceful deities, he said, represent the integrated aspects of the mind. The wrathful ones are fears and repressed shadows. These images are neither good nor bad. They are mirrors. They reveal what we still need to understand about ourselves, and perhaps for that reason, the Bardo Thödol is not just a text about dying, but a manual about living. Because every time we face our own inner demons with awareness, we are rehearsing the moment when we will face them without a body. Modern science is beginning to see interesting parallels. Research into altered states of consciousness, whether through deep meditation, near-death experiences, or even psychedelics in clinical settings, shows similar brain patterns. During these experiences, many people report sensations of unity, symbolic visions, and encounters with luminous beings. The brain appears to enter a state of hyperconnectivity, where regions that are normally separate begin to communicate intensely. It's as if for a brief instant, the boundaries of perception dissolve. Tibetan monks called this the luminous clarity. Science calls it synchronized gamma activity. But at their core, both speak of the same mystery, the expansion of consciousness beyond the known. The second Bardo, called Chonid Bardo, is the realm of mental manifestations. In it, the mind projects lights of different colors, each reflecting spiritual qualities or inner challenges. The text warns, everything you see is yourself. Every light, every sound, every vision is part of your own mind. Recognizing this is the key to crossing the Bardo with serenity. Then comes the third Bardo, the Siddhipa Bardo, where the tendencies accumulated throughout life begin to manifest. Everything we have cultivated, our intentions, fears, loves, and regrets, takes form. It is the final mirror. Consciousness sees before it the results of the seeds it has planted. It is a moment of profound revelation, but also of opportunity, because even there, awakening is still possible. Tibetan masters say that life itself is the training for that moment, that every act of kindness, every gesture of presence, and every meditation are silent rehearsals for the final moment. That is why, in Tibetan Buddhism, spiritual training is not an escape from life. It is a preparation to live it with greater clarity. Meditation teaches us to observe without attachment. Compassion dissolves fear. Acceptance transforms the unknown into a friend. That is why they say, those who learn to die, learn to live. And there is a fascinating detail that the Bardo Thödol reveals. We all experience small deaths every day. When we fall asleep, when we leave a cycle behind, when we release an old version of ourselves. Sleep is a miniature Bardo. The masters developed what they called dream yoga, a practice in which the meditator learns to remain conscious even during sleep. They believe that by training the mind to recognize the dream, we are training it to recognize the light at the moment of death. That changes everything, doesn't it? Because suddenly dying ceases to be a distant event and becomes a process we already experience in small doses. Every time we let go of something we love, every time we forgive, every time we take a deep breath and let the past go, we are, in some way, practicing the art of dying. And perhaps, by understanding this, death loses the face of fear and reveals what it truly is. A passage, a return to what we have always been. They say that true preparation for death begins long before it happens. That every breath, every mindful gaze, every act of kindness is, in truth, a silent rehearsal for the moment we leave this body. The Tibetan masters taught that consciousness is like the sky, vast, free, and unchanging. Emotions, thoughts, and fears are merely passing clouds, and spiritual training is the art of not confusing ourselves with the clouds, but recognizing the sky that has always been behind them. To live, in this sense, is to learn how to die, not in a tragic sense, but in the deepest one, to die to fear, to attachment to the illusions that bind us. Because each time we let go of something, we are reborn a little more lucid. The Tibetan Book of the Dead is not only about the beyond, it is about the now. It reminds us that consciousness is a continuous river, flowing through lives, dreams, experiences, and silences. The water changes, but the river remains. Modern neuroscience, interestingly, is beginning to find signs of this flow. Studies show that meditation, compassion, and altruism alter the functioning of the brain, making us more stable in the face of fear and more open to empathy. It's as if spiritual practice reconfigures the map of the mind, making it capable of recognizing the light even in the darkest hours. And perhaps that is precisely what the Bardo Thödol has always sought to teach us, that awakening does not begin after death, but here, in the simple act of being present. The practice of mindfulness is like a mirror reflecting the mind in its natural state. When we pause for a moment and simply observe the flow of thoughts, we notice that something remains still behind it all. A silent awareness, a space that observes without judgment. It is this space, according to the masters, that passes through birth and death. But preparation doesn't happen only in silence. It also manifests through compassion. The Tibetans believe that every act of kindness creates a vibration that transcends time. The energy of a good deed is never lost. It becomes a bridge, an illuminated path that will help consciousness when the time comes to cross the Bardos. That's why they say, the best way to die well is to live well. And the most beautiful part is that this ancient wisdom is beginning to converse with science. Researchers studying near-death experiences report that many people, upon returning, begin to live more compassionately, more lightly, more consciously. It's as if they have seen that love is the only thing that truly crosses the boundary of life. The fear of death, in the end, is the fear of the unknown. But when we look within and recognize that the unknown is in fact what we have always been, that fear begins to dissolve, and in its place arises a silent serenity, a deep trust in the continuity of life. The ancient Tibetan masters used to say that reflecting on impermanence is not morbidity, it is wisdom. Because when we remember that everything passes, every moment becomes precious, every hug, every sunset, every breath shines with the glow of something sacred, we live more fully when we accept that life is brief. Death then ceases to be a threat and becomes a teacher. It shows us what truly matters. It teaches that nothing is guaranteed, that time is a gift, and that the only thing we carry with us is the state of our mind, the clarity, love, and awareness we have cultivated. When the moment of crossing comes, what the Tibetans call the last Bardo, we may realize that there is no darkness waiting for us, but rather a familiar light. a presence that has always been there, merely hidden behind the noise of life. Perhaps that is the true meaning of the journey, to recognize the light not as something distant, but as what we have always been. Life and death are like two shores of the same river, and consciousness is the water that flows between them, changing shape but never ceasing to be water. Every thought, every emotion, every choice is a wave that composes this flow. So perhaps the greatest lesson of the Tibetan Book of the Dead is this: that death is not the opposite of life, but a part of it. That living with presence, love, and compassion is the best way to prepare for dying, and that the light we seek at the end is the same one that already shines, silently, within us right now. If this reflection touched something in you, perhaps it's because in some way, it speaks to a truth that was already there, just waiting to be remembered. Share this journey with those you love. Sometimes a simple conversation about the mystery of life can open paths we never imagined. And remember, life is a crossing. Every step, every breath is part of the same path that one day we will all walk together toward the light.